It's great to be with all of you in New York remotely and with the folks that are here in the room here in Boston or Cambridge. And yeah, I appreciate that introduction. I have been traveling quite a bit, and I had a really memorable introduction last week when a person got up and said, I've heard Bob Kegan many times. I don't know how he does it, but each talk he gives is better than the next. Think about that. Okay. So for any of you who've heard me before, I hope you won't come to that conclusion. But actually, I'm not going to really talk to you. I mean, I am a professor, and I could just, entertain myself and sort of talk to you, for hours at a time. But I'm not going to do that. What I really want to do is work with you very actively in a little bit of an exercise that can kind of bring you into, some of the dynamics that I think an extraordinary place like Next Jump and the bigger family of organizations, which we call Deliberately Developmental Organizations, DDOs for short, or growth culture organizations is another way of quickly referring to it, kind of, what they are about. Next Jump is a absolutely shining global example of what it would be like to care so much about developing the capabilities of your people that you would seek to create a culture that would immersively gather everyone kind of into an ongoing process on behalf of the better me, better you, better us kind of idea. So when people ask me, just to say very quickly why I think they should go to the efforts, because it's obviously not a simple thing to transform your culture, whether that culture is residing in a business or in the education sector, in our military services, in churches. I'm just thinking of all the different sectors in which we are now working. When people ask me really quickly, well, why should we do this? One fast answer, and I'm assuming you can see my screen here, that I can kind of scribble on and stuff, is that I think it is the absolutely most powerful way to accelerate the development of certain critical capabilities and to dramatically reduce certain kinds of crippling costs. And those costs can be reflected even in the bottom line if we're talking about businesses, or cost to kind of deteriorating your ability to deliver kind of on your mission. And what kinds of critical capabilities and what kinds of crippling costs am I referring to? So in a very, very quick way, the capabilities that I'm talking about are what we call the adaptive capabilities, the capabilities that are not just about training, and if you accept that crude image as a kind of vessel of the mind or the self, one kind of necessary learning, and I don't mean to devalue it, it's an important aspect in any realm of work, is kind of adding new skills, sort of like adding new apps or files to your mind's operating system. But in order to meet the stickiest kinds of challenges that any organization faces, you need capabilities that have to do not just with acquiring new skills and having more to draw on and kind of downloading these new skills into your operating system. You need for the operating system itself to get bigger. So we need to move, when we're talking about these kinds of capabilities, we're moving beyond just skill sets to mindsets. And so every organization kind of that we work in, if you ask, what are the things that you're really going for? Do you feel you have currently the capabilities in your people to kind of deliver on that? The answer is always no, or I'm pretty sure that I don't. And so you have to be thinking about what are the ways that you really can engage mindsets so that people are actually growing. The whole mental system is growing, not just kind of new skills. So it's that shift from just skill sets to mindsets, which, as Charlie was really referring to it in his sweet introduction there, is really the essence of what adult development is all about. Now, what are the crippling costs in every organization? There's nothing more precious than the time attention and energies of your people. And if people are spending some considerable portion of their, work day or work week, what are the letters here? Lying, hiding, or faking, which I'm assuming are words that you're already familiar with there in New York. This refers to what we call the second job. If people are doing a second job that nobody's paying them for, which is essentially managing other people's favorable impressions of them, covering your rear end, looking good, feeling like you should never make mistakes, always being at your best. This is an enormous, continuous, hemorrhaging cost of your most precious resource, the time and attention of your people. And like any of these ideas, they can seem simple at the beginning, and the more you dig into them, the more and more layers, that they have a better me and a better you, equals a better us. Sounds like a pretty simple little equation. But, as I'm sure any of you in this room or in New York who spent time kind of in this culture keep discovering more and more levels of it, just as we keep discovering more and more levels of the costs kind of the second job. If I'm working here and I'm spending some portion of my time basically trying to preserve my stock value within the setting, making sure, that you keep thinking well of me. There's a way in which, you're paying me full-time money for doing, part-time work. I'm much less likely to grow and develop if I do a good job sort of hiding my weaknesses. But it's not just that. It's that if the other people that I'm working with are doing the same thing, and let's say in particular, if the person I report to is doing that same thing, then every single person who's ever had any work experience knows what I mean when I say, how you have to spend energies working around kind of the ego defenses of your boss and kind of, having to just kind of do all sorts of things because they're not basically attending to their stuff. So all that energy that you spend, not just with your own lying, hiding, and faking, but the ways in which you have to maneuver around everybody else's, even doubles the kinds of costs that are going on. So if anybody sat down and calculated what all that was, I think it would, it would blow us all away. So if this is what's really going on in a DDO, one of the quickest ways into it, that you're trying to dramatically increase a very precious asset, this kind of mindset development, and you're trying to reduce a very, very crippling cost. I want to, in the little time that I have with you, engage you in a little bit of an exercise that will give you one way of kind of connecting with both of these dynamics kind of at the same time. What does it really mean to be working kind of at the level of mindset? What does it really mean to understand more particularly the unique fingerprint of your particular second job, right? Any good organization will be able to define your first job, should at least be in a file somewhere, what you were hired to do. But, in a DDO, every organization should have just as good a handle on your second job. What are those actual particulars that you are working on, which, if you can come to trust that you have a safe enough, trustworthy enough culture, you will start to give up. You'll start giving up that second job because you'll be actually rewarded and commended for bringing your whole self out to work, bringing your whole self out to play, having the opportunities to have the satisfaction of demonstrating your strengths, but also demonstrate your weaknesses as quickly as you can so we can kind of build supports around you and help you to overcome them. So this little exercise is going to be a way to help you have a personal connection to the notion of mindset for you, to the notion of what it would mean to really understand what is your most likely second job and what it would mean to kind of give it up. Or even if half the people in an organization gave up half the time they were spending on the second job, what an enormous boost of energy that would be for any setting. So we're going to do this through introducing you to a whole kind of approach that's called the immunity to change approach, which does rest on kind of 30 to 40 years of research in adult development. And to do this, you should have in front of you a kind of a mostly blank template with a few lines in it. Bless you. And how come that doesn't work? Okay, I need my tech supporters here. Oh, there we are. So what I'm going to be doing with you here over the, I guess, 45 minutes that I have left, though I might go over a couple minutes because Charlie gave me such a flowery introduction that I should take those minutes back, don't you think? What we're going to do is we're going to do something sort of equivalent to helping you develop something like a psychological X-ray. Okay, if you consider that metaphor, an X-ray helps you see beneath the surface, helps you see into things that normally you cannot see. And we're going to do kind of a mental version of that. I'll comfort you, or try to in the beginning, to tell you I'm not going to show you any kind of disease or anything that's broken inside. In fact, I'm actually going to show you something quite amazing about yourself that should bring you into the mysteries more of this kind of work. And if you were going to develop an X-ray, then you'd need something like a blank film to begin with, and that piece of paper that you have in front of you is going to be our equivalent to a blank film. I am speaking to you a little bit faster than my normal speed just because I only have a limited amount of time. I'm hoping you can track me at this speed. Is that working okay here in this room? Okay. For those of you in New York, this is the speed everyone talks in New York, so it should be no problem. Okay. So the piece of paper is going to be the equivalent to a blank film, and we're going to sort of develop it gradually into a unique picture that will help you into a better understanding of your own second job and what it means to really help develop adaptive capabilities, to really touch your mindset, see what its growing edge might be, see a new pathway. The simplest way to put this is it's a little exercise that gives you a way into thinking about personal improvement that transcends the default model most of us have in our heads about personal improvement, which is basically it's a matter of effort, applying yourself, willpower, New Year's resolutions, put yourself on a diet, that kind of approach, where you kind of identify, or somebody identifies for you something that would be valuable to change. You agree, I should change that, and then you just try real hard, okay? And that approach doesn't work very well, and you're going to see why in a moment. So just as sort of two quick examples to begin with, since we're going to look at some of the mysteries and difficulties of change. In the beginning of our book about the immunity to change, my co-creator and longtime partner, Lisa Lahey, and I quote studies from the health sector that show that if heart doctors tell their seriously at-risk heart patients that they could literally die if they don't change their ways of living around diet, exercise, smoking, and the like, it still turns out that only about 1 in 7 patients can actually make the changes. And I think we can assume the other 6 people have just as great a desire to go on living and see their children and grandchildren grow up and see the trees finally bloom in the spring and whatever it is that makes being alive a wonderful thing. And if people can't make the changes that they know they need to make because their lives are literally on the line, it is a kind of signal to us that we are still in need of some new ways of understanding what does get in the way between our genuine intentions and what we're actually able to bring about. Mere urgency, in other words, is not enough to actually help people make changes. What could be more urgent than the message that you are going to kill yourself, if you don't change your ways? And still, 6 out of 7 people can't do it. By the way, last month I was in a big academic medical center and I said the same thing. And during this break that we had, I had them all day. This guy came up to me and he said, "I'm a heart doctor. This thing you're going around telling everybody only 1 in 7 people can actually make the changes, much too optimistic," he said. So I don't know what the number is, but whatever it is, it's kind of a daunting, thing for us to think about. So, we'll come back to kind of the health sector, but let me introduce you to a real friend, become a friend, a guy who's running a financial services company in Boston, and he started to feel that his company needed to grow more fast than it was growing organically. So he actually acquired 2 of his smaller competitors. In doing so, the company became much more complex almost overnight. He realized that he might not any longer be the right leader for this company, and he hoped to be. So, he had the admirable, kind of willingness to take a look at himself about ways in which he was going to need to change his leadership style. because he had a company now that, like NextJump, had offices much more spread out than just, one locality. It was becoming much more complex because it was so much bigger and so on. So he sought feedback, and he began to identify a kind of an improvement goal or picture for himself, which you can see a little bit here on the screen, that he wanted to be more receptive to new ideas, be more flexible in his responses, especially in regard to new definitions for roles and responsibilities, be more open to delegating and supporting new lines of authority. And these are just his, but what I'm going to invite you to do in a moment, so you've got a sheet of paper there with 6 columns on it, but since we just have an abbreviated amount of time, we're just going to kind of do enough to give you a taste of this. So we're going to focus on the 4 columns in the middle, and we're going to start with the second column from the left, where you can see it says 1 on the top. And in that upper little headline space, you could write in my improvement goal. And in a moment, I'm going to shut up and ask us all to just keep the room quiet, whether we're here in Boston or in New York. Just keep it quiet for a minute so you can think for yourself what would be a worthwhile improvement goal for you to identify for yourself. And I just want to say a word about this before you actually pick something. I'm going to encourage you to pick something hard. I mean, maybe something that you've been trying to improve on and you haven't been happy with the results. They've either been too meager or too brief. They haven't been long lasting. And those are the 2 most common kinds of complaints. Yeah, maybe I did lose the weight, but a year later I regained it all. Or, maybe I did try to, do something and I only accomplished about 20% of it. I'll give you some examples of the most common families of improvement goals that leaders all over the world seem to select in the various projects that we have going now all over the place, with this stuff. And we often go around and ask people and get feedback. So somebody might say to you, well, when I think about you, you have a lot of energy, which is positive in many ways, but it does lead you to just get involved in lots of different things. And so you tend to spread yourself too thinly. So I think if you could get better at prioritizing, if you could get better at saying no to others and maybe even no to some of your own enthusiasms, I think that would make you, much more effective. Or somebody might say, communication, when you're the one doing the speaking, you're actually very impressive, but listening is an important part of communication too. And I think you're just a middle of the pack at best as a listener, if you just want me to be honest, because and maybe it's because you are so smart and you feel like you know what people mean when they're halfway through their thoughts, but it leads people to feel that they're less well listened to, and you kind of move a little too fast. I think if you just slow down, really just kind of get with people, that could make you more effective. Or somebody might say, you are by nature a nice person, which, is nice. But I think you like being a nice person an awful lot. And for whatever reason, you tend to shy away from the difficult conversations. So I think if you could get better with conflict, that would make you more effective. Or somebody might say, no one could fault your professionalism, but your people really want to experience you more as a human being, not just kind of, an admirable machine. So I think if you could somehow let people in a little bit closer to who you actually are as a person, that would dramatically increase your followership. Well, I mean, I could go on and on with these examples, but the reason I'm sharing them is because it's pretty clear that none of those things are going to be accomplished overnight. I mean, none of them are just about learning 1 or 2 new skills. You'll download that into your system and suddenly you'll change. They're all the sorts of goals that if you were to achieve them, it's probably going to pull you into becoming, in fact, a better you. Right? So I'm going to encourage you, and I think you'll hold what I have to offer you this afternoon to a tougher test if you'll, pick an improvement goal for yourself, something like that. So what I'd like you to do, if we can just keep the room quiet here for a minute, is just sort of think about different kinds of feedback you've gotten, formally, informally. Think about yourself if you were just to stand in front of a mirror and you'd be just brutally honest with yourself. This is the single thing. If I could get significantly better at it, it would make the biggest positive difference for me. What might you come up with? And the only criteria that this goal has to meet is that you're pretty clear getting better on this front puts you on the hook to be the main driver of it. It's not, yeah, I could be a much, much better delegator if I had better people to delegate to. Okay, that would not meet that criteria, right? Because you're basically saying it's not about you, it's about your bench being too weak. So you have to be clear that this improvement goal puts you on the hook to change. And the second thing is that if I were to ask you, like on a 1 to 5 scale, how important to you is it to actually make progress on this front, where 5 would be not at all important and 1 would be not at all important and 5 would be very important, it should be like a 4 or a 5 in importance for you. Okay, so I'm going to shut up, let you think for a few seconds, and I'll be back like in 45 seconds since we're doing everything faster. So in about 20 seconds, I'm going to interrupt you just so you know. I'm looking at all you hardworking people there in New York. Can you hold your hand up if you're ready to move on? Okay, cool. Yes, and hello to all of you. And I think a number of you are from the Air Force. Let me thank each of you for your service. So that's column 1. Let's move to column 2. The column 2, the header for column 2, as you can see, is doing and not doing instead. And what column 2 is, don't fill it in yet, but you'll see that column 2 is about kind of being brutally honest in creating a picture of what it looks like when you are screwing up with respect to this improvement goal. It's going to be a picture of all the things you do that tend to derail, sabotage, or work against your goal. All the things you fail to do that have the same effect. So be very clear before you begin that this is not the customary picture. Here's what I'm doing to further my goal, yay and hooray. Here are the things I do that work against it. I'd be willing to bet on every one of you here and in New York that there are a number of things you're doing that are advancing your goal. So let's just agree that's true, but be clear that's not what's on the table at the moment. Rather, you're going to do this maybe a little bit odder thing of telling on yourself. It's going to be a picture of sort of your sins of commission and omission, all the ways that you screw up or work against your own improvement goal. So just to take a few examples kind of our friend, the CEO, you remember he has this goal of being, more open on a number of fronts. Do you remember his goal? Here it is. More receptive to new ideas, more flexible in his responses, open to delegating, and so on. So what isn't he? Curt responses to new ideas, closing off, cutting off, an overruling tone, very specific kind of observation. Not asking open-ended questions or seeking opinions of other people very often. Communicating to others too much and too frequently that they need to touch back to him. Maintaining their dependence on him. Too quick to give my opinion when that may not even be what people are asking for. So notice, everything on the list works against his first column goal. They're all out and out behaviors, things you might even be able to capture on a video, the video camera. So time for you again, another quiet 45 seconds. And, no one's going to look at this unless you share it with them. So you can be just as honest and, truthful with yourself as you choose in filling out the second column. So another 20-second warning to you. I'm going to interrupt you in about 20 seconds. If you've run out of things, then just imagine, one of your toughest critics, if you went and asked them, what are some of the things I do that undermine that goal? See if another item or two doesn't occur to you. Okay, so a lot of people think that this step we just took is really the crucial step. I mean, I've had many, many leaders say to me, if you can just get very busy people to slow down, if you can get somewhat defended and armored people to actually take an honest look in a mirror that you hold up for them and have them actually see and agree, this is a thing I am doing that is working against my own intentions, well then, people will tend to take it from there. I mean, I've heard many, many leaders will say to me, I mean, after all, my people are, they're grown-ups, they're responsible, we're paying them a decent salary. I think that, because many people say, well, we invest quite a lot in trying to, support our people. And many don't. For those that do, it's much more weighted toward holding up the mirror, toward helping people see what their strengths are, helping them see what some of the things they do that, aren't so strong. And then it's kind of like, well, our people aren't children. We're not going to prescribe for them what they ought to do. And people ought to take it from there. That's what it is to be an adult, a responsible adult professional. You'll kind of take it from there. But if you go back to the things about the heart doctors and so on, you see that people, people even may want to take it from there. People leave those doctors' offices saying, I don't want to die. I am going to change my ways of, eating, drinking, smoking, exercising, whatever it might be. And still most of them can't do it. So it turns out to be pretty naive to kind of say, well, that's what a responsible adult professional will do. They'll just take it from there. Because what tends to follow, from this second step that we've taken is essentially kind of that you sort of put yourself on a diet, whether it's about, getting fit or whether it's about being a better delegator, you kind of describe some new regimen of behavior, whether how you're going to eat differently or how you're going to exercise your authority differently. That's more in the direction of what you want to do. We don't have the time for it right now, but you can just write this down. When you get a free minute, go to YouTube and punch in "Stop It comma, Bob Newhart. And you'll see a 5-minute sketch there where Newhart is playing the role of a therapist trying to help someone, and the person explains kind of all the stuff she does. He's very gentle with her, kind of extracting it all, you know. So you're worried about that. And yes, he says, okay, now I'm going to give you just 2 little words. I want you to kind of truly take them in, leave my office, and put them into practice in your life. She says, okay, should I write them down? She says, reaching into her purse. And he says, oh, well, you could if you want, but it's just 2 words. We find mostly that people can remember it. He says, okay, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Stop it! She's all startled and everything. She says, what? And he says, stop it. She says, I don't know, what do you mean? He says, that's so funny. Every time I say this to people, they ask me what I mean. It's just 2 simple words, stop it, you know. And, you know, she says, well, you know, but I can't. I mean, the way I was raised. She says, no, this has nothing to do with your childhood. Just stop it. Okay. Now, the whole thing is funny, but it's really, it hits on something, which is that generally when we do look into a mirror, the person who is most powerfully saying stop it to us is ourselves. We see, yes, I do this, and I've got to just stop it, you know. You know, we try to make ourselves change. This is basically the willpower New Year's resolutions dieters approach. Basically, you tell yourself to stop it, you're going to try real hard. And the tricky and really deceiving thing about this is that initially it seems like it's working. If you have a strong enough desire to lose weight, typically around the 1st of the year, you know, you see these cartoons where the, you know, fitness centers, there's no place to park, you know, on January 15th, and by April, you know, it's just a vast wasteland. You can park anywhere because nobody's there. So if you want to do it badly enough, you put yourself on a diet. After a week, you will not have lost all the weight you hope to lose, but you'll have lost a few pounds, and it'll make you feel, oh, my clothes are a little less snug. You know, this is working, so it'll encourage you to stay on the diet, and a week later, you lose a little bit more, and people will start saying, hey, you're looking kind of good. What's going on? And this is going to encourage you more, and you're going to stay on it because you tell yourself, okay, I haven't quite reached my goal yet, but this must be working because directionally everything's happening the way that it should. And that's enough maybe even to keep you on the diet long enough that you lose all the weight. People do often achieve their weight loss goals. It's just that over 90% of people a year later have regained their weight. In fact, a recent study showed plus 7% of the weight that they took off in the first place, which is one of the most helpful pieces of information of the whole afternoon, by the way. If you want to lose weight, the one thing you should surely never do is diet, and you're going to learn why here before this session is over. So that's the default notion for improvement. You look real hard into the mirror, or somebody gives you tough feedback, you make a sincere pledge to yourself that you're going to stop it. You try real hard to change your behavior, and for a brief period of time, bless you, you will. You will, but eventually, and people do differ with respect to how much willpower they have, but nobody has an infinite supply. Eventually, it's going to wear out, and you're going to essentially regain, you know, you're going to go back to where you were. And the fast reason for why this is, I'll just tell you right now, is that the normal dieter has only changed his or her behavior. They never changed their mindset that has to do with why they're eating or not exercising, you know, in the way that they are. So if you don't change your mindset, but you just change your behavior, you can only do it for so long. Eventually, you're going to go back to the old behavior because you never changed your mindset. So all of that means is we have to get the mindset up on the table. We have to get, you know, below the surface, I guess, to mix my metaphors. We need for your x-ray to kind of show you more of what's going on at a level deeper than behavior, which is the mother of behavior. The mother of behavior is the way you think, the way you construct reality, the way that you're making sense, or for brief purposes, let's just call it your mindset. So to do that, we have to actually take a bigger next step. And that next step starts with sort of respecting our complexity as human beings, realizing we're not just reprogrammable machines. And that one feature of our complexity is that, yeah, we have motives, intentions, commitments, whatever you might want to call them, that we are aware of, that we can name like you did in your first column. And we can then take a kind of responsibility for it. Or we can lament that we're not accomplishing it more. We can make plans to try to accomplish it and so on. These are the motives, you know, intentions or commitments that we have. We say we have this. But an interesting feature of human beings is that, you know, there are the motives or the commitments we have, and then there are also the commitments that have us, so to speak, the ones that are kind of running us. So people say, I think this, I feel that, and they're talking about the thoughts and feelings that are in their awareness that they can name. And those are all true and they're all valuable. But in addition to the thoughts and feelings we have, there are thoughts and feelings that have us. This is more the blind side. This is the stuff that is running us. And we become a better us by actually overcoming these kinds of blind sides. And so all of that brings us kind of to the third column. And the header for the third column is my hidden commitments, my hidden commitments. These are the commitments that have me, not the commitments that I'm driving, but the ones that are driving me. And you should almost put commitments in quotes there at the top of column 3, because you think of commitments as a conscious thing that you're aware of, and you can get up each morning and say, I'm going to try to do this. But these are the commitments you are not aware of. And since you're not aware of them, I cannot say, let's just keep the rooms quiet for 40 seconds and would you please just be honest and write down your hidden commitments. That's not going to work. So we have a way of sneaking up on them. You'll notice in column 3, you've got this little box there in the upper third or so of column 3. And we're going to do this in 2 steps by first filling in that box, and then it's going to generate some raw material that's going to get us to these possible interesting animals for you to take a look at, these hidden commitments that are driving you that you might not even be so aware of. So the first step is to fill that little box. And the way that you're going to fill that little box in a moment is essentially by truth in advertising here. I suppose I have almost a medical responsibility for saying this. I'm going to invite you to intentionally trigger yourselves, okay? You have a part of your brain that is basically scanning the environment for danger or alarm. That part of the brain is called the amygdala. It's an inheritance from our ancestors when what they might have worried about was encountering a bear in the woods that would rip the flesh off their bones. But you know, the interesting thing is, even though none of you are too worried about that at the moment, it doesn't have to be a bear. It could just be somebody whose respect or admiration is important to you, arching an eyebrow or having a certain tone of voice in response to something you say, and without you even thinking about it, you just automatically have a reaction of fear and alarm. Oh my God, this person doesn't respect me anymore. It's just an automatic sense of alarm. And understanding the things that will ring our alarm bells, that's what you could call this little box at the top of column 3, kind of an alarm box or a yuck box, a worry box. You're going to be filling it up quite shortly with a bunch of negative emotions, things on the fear or loathing spectrum, things that either worry you, cause you anxiety, that's the fear side, or things that just have a lot of distaste for you, that's the loathing side. Now, about what? This is where we kind of cash in your brave candor in column 2, because in a moment, what I'm going to ask you to do is go back to your second column. And if you look at each one of the entries in your second column, they essentially evoke a little drama, right? So here's this person, too quick to give his opinion. So there's a little drama that he could actually cast himself into. He's probably sitting at the table and people are presenting a certain kind of problem to him, and his normal tendency is going to be to jump in and give his brilliant opinion. So I'm going to ask you to go back to each one of the things in the second column and actually cast yourself into the little situation that each one of those evoke. And then I'm going to ask you to imagine yourself doing the opposite of what you normally do, or even trying to do the opposite. And when you do imagine yourself doing that, it is going to create some inner emotion, some negative emotion. Now, I could have just said to you, go back to your second column, look at each of the things you wrote, think about doing the opposite. What wouldn't you like about that? But if I did that, you would think your way into the answer. And I don't want you to just think your way. Metaphorically, I want to get below your neck. I want to get into your guts. And so I want you to actually cast yourself into that situation and then imagine yourself doing or even trying to do the opposite until you can kind of get to the threat, the danger, or the alarm that comes up for you. I'm somebody who's probably too quick to give his opinion. And, since I lean in the direction of arrogance, and, I think Next jumps at its best when it's not just telling people, if you lean arrogant, then just hold your tongue in a meeting and don't always be the first to speak and don't be the one to speak the most. You're at your best when you're not just asking people to alter that behavior so they can use a meeting to practice, but to also tune into what is the inner dialogue that's going on, or the inner monologue, when you do hold your tongue. Now, since I do lean arrogant, I can give you a good example of when I'm holding my tongue in a meeting when there's something I'm desperately wanting to say. What I'm kind of saying to myself is, it's not that I want to dominate this discussion. It's not that I want to mansplain or somehow take over. It's just out of my love for all of you and for all of us, I want to save you from the disaster that you're going to get yourself into if I do not now make my brilliant contribution. That's my basic feeling, right? I'm basically like, I'm worried that we're going to go off the cliff if I don't speak up. Okay, that's my, now what you're trying to do is put yourself into each one of those situations. Imagine yourself doing the opposite and try to identify the alarm that comes up for you. One last little thing before I finally shut up and let you do this, because I know you're dying to do it. We have learned that most people are pretty good at getting about this far down below their neck, but I need you to get right into the real source of alarm. So here's a little tip that we've learned to help you get closer down to the real heart of the thing. Just ask yourself one more question after you've identified it, especially if what you come up with has a kind of a common ring to it. I worry I'll fail in my work. Okay, great. That's an example. But it's something you can imagine a lot of people saying. But if you would just ask one more question, like, what will be the real danger, the real awfulness about my failing in my work? One person might say, then I'll have to concede that maybe I'm not as smart as I was. But the other person might say, then I would bring shame and dishonor to my family. In some cultures, it would be something more like that than the individual profile thing about whether I'm so smart. And the third person might say, then I'd be more like my unsuccessful brother, and I never want to be like him. Now, notice they all started out with the same thing, but just by asking that one question, they got to something a little bit more particular. So try to take it down to what is the real source of the danger to you. Okay, I'm going to finally let you do this. Go to each of those items in column 2. Cast yourself in the situation. Imagine doing the opposite. Identify the negative feeling, and if you would, put it in that little box. "20-second warning. I'm hoping you might be ready to move on in 20 seconds. Okay. Are you ready to go on? Can you raise your hand if you're ready to go on? Cool. Thank you. So just to kind of see where we are and how this is developing, let's go back to that example I gave at the beginning, how people don't follow their doctor's orders. A big segment of this problem is you have an aging baby boom population, and the older you get, the more likely you are to be prescribed a maintenance medication, a drug that you should take maybe even for the rest of your life. I myself am in the baby boom cohort. A number of years ago, my doctor didn't like how high my bad cholesterol was. She said, you can only control that so much by diet. It's mostly inherited. I'm going to put you on a statin drug. I want you to take that drug every single night before you go to bed. I do take it every night. It reduces my high cholesterol. She's happy and I'm happy. But in this respect, I'm actually a little bit in the minority, because when you do studies of people who are prescribed these maintenance medications and you ask them shortly thereafter, what have you been prescribed and why have you been prescribed, you get very high levels of understanding. Then if you ask them, if I come back in a year and check to see if you've taken that drug every day as prescribed, what do you think's the likelihood you're going to be able to say yes? And they tend to look at you like, you know, what part of I could have a stroke and die didn't you understand? You know, kind of like, the doctor told me I could have a stroke and die, that it has no negative side effects. It's covered in my insurance. So what's the probability? Duh, I would say 100%. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I turns out to be a really good question, because when you do go back a year later, in various studies, 53 to 57% of the samples are people who are not taking the drug regularly as prescribed. It's a huge problem. So we did a study of this. This is actually one of those nice problems where the social benefits and the commercial benefits are actually converging rather than diverging. I mean, assuming the drugs are properly prescribed, it's a social benefit if you can help people to stay on them, and it's a multi-billion-dollar lost revenue problem for the pharmaceutical sector. So we had 97 people, excuse me, in our study who all were on 2 or more maintenance medications. They all wanted to be adherent and none of them were being adherent. And when we asked them, well, why aren't you taking it if you know you need to take it? The most common answer was, I don't know, okay? Or the next common answer was, well, things come up and I get busy. These are basically the answers of children. If you have children, you'd be familiar with them. When bright people give you the answers of children, you know you're in the presence of mysterious forces, okay? When they say, I don't know, they're being absolutely honest, because we're talking about the commitments that have them, the feelings and thoughts that have them. We're talking about the blind side. So here's a real guy. We put them all through the same process you're going through right now. And all of them had pretty much the same commitment in the first column. They want to get better at following their doctor's orders, right? And then the second column, he has to tell on himself, like I asked you to do. So he says, I don't take them regularly. I stop for long periods. I don't refill them promptly when they run out. I get those voicemail messages from the pharmacy telling me it's time for you to refill your. I just hang up on the voice message. Okay. Then I want this person to fill that little box just like you did. So I'm asking the person, you know, put yourself in this position. But, you know, I probably didn't do it very well. And, you know, I said, so what would be the worst thing for you, you know, if you did take those drugs every day? And he looked right at me and he said, the worst thing for me here is if I don't start taking those drugs every single day, I could have a stroke and die. What do you think of that answer to my question here in Boston? So I asked him, what would be the worst, you know, for you if you did take those drugs every single day? And he looked me right in the eye and he said, the worst thing for me is if I don't start taking those drugs every single day, I could have a stroke and die. Do you notice anything peculiar about his answer? Anybody? Anything strike you about his answer? Very good. He did not answer my question. I asked him, what would be the horrible thing if you did take the drug every single day? And he looked me right in the eye and told me, if I don't take that drug every single day, I could have a stroke and die. Didn't even answer my question, and he wasn't even aware he wasn't answering my question, which if we had the time, I could explain to you, but this is what a neural pathway is. He has a very well-trodden neural pathway about this drug, and if you could slow it down and listen to the words, it would probably sound something like, this is ridiculous, I've got to start taking that drug. If I don't take that drug every single day, I can have a stroke and die. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to take it every single day. I should take it. I'm going to take it every single day, because if I don't take it, I can have a stroke and die. He walks down that path 20 times a day, right? I don't think he has any path at all for the question I asked him. My question was, what's so awful if you do take the drug every single day? So I said to him, sir, I understand. If you don't take that drug, you could have a stroke and die. But just stick with me, because I'm asking you something a little bit different here. Imagine there you are actually taking the drug every single, if I had to take that damn drug every single day, he said, interrupting me, I would feel like an old sick man. I tell you, I would feel like somebody more in my father's generation, who's in a nursing home, by the way, who I'm not visiting. Oof, okay. A lot of stuff came out. I said, whoa, you've got some very strong, you're damn right I do. He said, I'm not some half-dead guy on life support who has to think about taking a damn drug every day just to get through his day. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? Now we're getting to how he is triggered. You know, and you tell doctors about this and they go, we inconvenience people a lot more than just asking them to take a drug. It's irrational. Okay, call it whatever you want. But for him, the prescription of taking a drug every day has a sort of ascription of a kind of identity that he's this old sick guy who's now dependent on having to take a drug. That's what's in his alarm box. I'm an old, sick, dependent person who has to rely on some crutch, you know, in order to get through the day. Now, the next move that you're going to make, the next move that he made, just takes each one of these worries and takes a simple little, I think, unobjectionable step, which is that most people don't just have worries. You spend energies to make sure that the things you worried about don't occur. He doesn't just have the worry, I'm going to feel like an old man. He has a commitment, or more rigorously put, a commitment has him to not feel like an old, sick man. Simple as that. And once he sees that he has that kind of commitment, I'm committed to not feeling like an old, sick, over-the-hill man, to not accepting that I'm on my way out, to not having to be dependent on a drug or whatever. His X-ray begins to take a kind of shape. He can see a kind of system across these three columns. And we call that an immune system, because he begins to see his own immunity to change. As he said, this is a picture of me with one foot on the gas pedal here. I really do want to take those drugs on time, but I also have one foot on the brakes. I don't want to feel like an old, sick, dependent person. And he can now see how all these behaviors in the second column, which work against his first column commitment, are consistently, brilliantly, faithfully delivering on his third column commitment. If I don't want to feel like an old, sick, dependent person, it makes all the sense in the world. I stay as far away from the drugs, the drugstore, the voicemail, and everything. It's all brilliant. That's his mindset. Okay, so what I'm going to ask each of you to do here in Cambridge and in New York is take a look at each of the alarms in your alarm box. Start out with the strongest one, not necessarily the first or last. Start out with the juiciest, strongest one. And then you're not making any big psychological leap. You're just converting it from a passive worry to an active commitment to not have that thing that you're worried about occur. What's my worry? People will think I'm incompetent. What's my commitment? I'm committed to not having people think I'm incompetent. Okay? It's not I'm committed to people thinking I'm competent. You have to preserve the terror or the horror in the commitment. The horror is you're going to think I'm incompetent. The commitment is I'm committed that you never would think I'm incompetent. Then go back into your worry box and pick the second strongest worry and construct it as a commitment to keep the thing that you're worried about from occurring. And when you do this, when you start to see your breaks in the third column, you should now, your map should start to pop. Instead of it being just a bunch of words on a page, you should begin to see a picture of an equilibrium. One foot on the gas pedal, but now you start to see one foot on the brake. Okay, your turn. Take a moment, convert each of the worries into an active commitment to keep the thing you're worried about from occurring. So I'm going to interrupt you in about 20, 30 seconds, and I'm going to end with you in about 5 minutes, no more, if I can be granted a 5-minute extension here. So let's go back to that leader. You remember his goal. He wants to be more receptive to new ideas, more flexible in his responses about new definitions and roles and responsibilities, be more open to delegating and supporting the lines of authority. Then he identifies all this way. He doesn't ask open-ended questions. He communicates that everybody should check back with him. He gives his opinion even when it's not asked for. So what are some of the commitments, the invisible competing commitments he came to? Well, one is I have a commitment to having things done my way. Of course, what he initially said is, I'm worried it won't be done the right way. Well, what's the right way? Well, actually, the way that I want. So, it's my commitment to, making sure that things get done my way. Or I'll feel less like I'm the prime mover here in the organization, which is how he had felt for 10 years. I mean, he basically created this company. So he has a commitment to not experience himself as having less impact. I kind of fixed this up in a stronger version of how it should be. To not lose the pride of ownership of how we do things, of seeing my stamp on things. To not lose my sense of myself as the super problem solver. These are just his. They're all some sort of, commitment to, avoiding a certain kind of loss, a commitment to self-protection. That's what an immune system does. It protects you. Once he sees he has those commitments, then all these behaviors here in the second column start to make a lot of sense. This is why stop it, as a means to improving, telling yourself to stop it, stop these things, doesn't actually work. Why? Because all these things, they are working against your first column commitment, but they are brilliantly serving your third column commitment, right? If I want to be the superhero, have everything done the way I think it should be done, to feel like I'm the, the savior of the organization, then it's going to make sense that I keep doing the things that are in the second column. Now, I promised you at the beginning that I was going to try to guide you through an exercise that would give you a little taste of the two most powerful dynamics that I think are going on, or the reason for being, more of a growth culture. One is to enhance these adaptive capabilities, and the other is to reduce the crippling cost of people wasting so much of their energies, not just doing their own faking and hiding and lying, but having to work around all the faking and hiding that everybody else is doing, especially the people who are, above them. So adaptive capabilities are developed through understanding your mindset, and what you have on your page right now, if you've got something there that interests you, if the thing has begun to click, if you can see how you have one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake, is a kind of mindset. A mindset's not just a cognitive thing. A mindset is a way of managing anxiety, the single most important private emotion in public life, anxiety, coursing through all of us all the time. People don't like to hear that because they say, I don't feel anxious all the time. I agree. You don't feel anxious all the time. Why? Because you have a brilliant system for controlling your anxiety. And you're looking at your system right now. This guy's system of controlling the anxiety that he loses his special place in the organization is what is driving his second column behaviors. So it's this system growing or changing. I don't know what just happened there, but it's cool. It's that system, growing or changing that is going to grow the capabilities. But look at that. Okay. Let's go to this idea of the second job, right? It isn't always just sort of managing other people's favorable impression. It isn't even always just sort of hiding, faking and lying, whatever it is. You take a look at your third column. That third column is giving you a picture of your second job. You are spending energies on behalf of preventing what you feel is a certain kind of loss. Your third column is naming ways you are spending energy. That is not on your first job description. I can almost guarantee it. Your third column should be naming ways you are spending energy on behalf of your own self-protection. How would you give up even half of that so that that energy could go into the real job and mission of the organization? That, of course, would be another hour, exercise or talk. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that I came to talk to you in order to show you that in spite of your genuine desire to bring about more of what's in the first column, you're never going to. Thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed my talk, right? Because you'll notice there's more columns we haven't filled in on the page. What we've essentially gotten is, as far as the diagnostic, you should now be able to see a limiting mindset. That mindset, which, by the way, may have helped you in many prior situations, is not going to enable you to accomplish your first column goal. And if your first column goal isn't that important, you're going to quickly forget this. In 2 weeks, you just won't even be able to remember it. But if your first column goal really matters to you, if it's a 4 or a 5, then even though some part of you is saying right now, I don't want to tamper with this system, it's keeping the lid on my alarm box, another part of you should be saying, well, we've got to tamper with this system because we really need to accomplish what is there, in the first column. So if you feel that way, one part of you doesn't want to tamper with it, another part of you realizes you have to, then you have in front of you not just an X-ray, but a dilemma. A dilemma is 2 lemmas. Lemma is the Greek word for premise or proposition, and you now have 2 battling premises there in the first column and the third column. And that actually sets you up for a different kind of learning journey. And just to explain it to you, and then I will really promise to end because I'm going a little past my time, what the fourth column is all about, and by the way, you can just Google your way to immunity to change, and you'll have all kinds of references. You can read books about it, articles about it, and so on. It'll take you further into all of this if you want to. One very robust practice to help support a growth culture. But in the fourth column, the header is my big assumptions. And what this does is it surfaces. It takes your worries and moves them into these self-protective commitments in the third column, honors them. It doesn't say stop it, it honors them. And then it says each of those third column commitments rests on some assumption. I'm assuming if I'm not the prime mover in the company, I'm going to become less interested in the company. I won't enjoy it anymore. I'll feel threatened. The company will do terrible, whatever. Once you identify those assumptions, that sets you up on a different path to improvement, different than just trying real hard. A path that is about running experiments. Is my assumption true? I have an assumption when I go into a meeting and hold my tongue because I lean arrogant and I want to work on my backhand. I don't just change my behavior. I have an assumption that if I don't make my brilliant intervention now, the group will make a suboptimal decision. I can test that assumption by holding my tongue and seeing, did the group, screw itself up or not? It's by identifying your assumptions in the fourth column, and then you see you've got another whole column. The header for that column is my first experiment, where you would begin to deliberately design experiments where you will do something different than what you normally do in order to get information from the world. Are my assumptions supported or not? And I'll tell you right now, I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen tens of thousands of maps. We did a massively open online course, a MOOC. We had 97,000 people do their maps from 103 countries. I've seen a lot of maps. Most of our assumptions are wacky, okay? They have a certain distortion in them. They are limiting assumptions. And if you can have direct experiences that your assumptions are not correct, you don't have to try hard to change your mind. The accumulated weight of the counter evidence just causes it to have less of a grip on you. When that assumption changes, the self-protective commitments in the third column can change. You realize that the things you're fighting against are phantoms. So it's not just wasted energy for the organization, it's wasted for you, because that thing out there that you're worrying about is going to kill you may not actually be out there. And by that means you grow, or develop. So I'm hoping through this little exercise that I've given you a little touch of what it means to say, in a growth culture, you need to get to the level of mindset. You need to understand better what your second job is about so you can actually begin to do less of it. I hope this has been a little bit helpful, and thank you for letting me be a small part of your program.